So about half the population is not very sensitive, and the other half is either moderately or highly sensitive.
We are here today live, again, with Hanging Out with the Practitioners with Mary Von Olin.
With the young people, what I'm seeing a lot, or who I attract, I believe, are people with anxiety, whether that's clinically diagnosed or just self-assessed. Basically, some anxiety and around navigating life, navigating this world where highly sensitive people is the term that comes to mind. We could talk a little bit about that. I also realized that in my work, when I started studying this concept of highly sensitive people, I'll tell you what that is if you don't know, anyone listening, but I realized that I was attracting more highly sensitive people. And with the young people that I attract into my practice tend to have that trait as well. So highly sensitive people, HSP for short, the concept is something that was discovered, well, officially by psychologist Dr. Elaine Aron, really kind of officially coined the term maybe 20 years ago now, I think the early 90s. And and they've done a lot of research since then confirming her suspicions that there's about, in any given group, any given demographic, there's about 20%, up to about 20%, 1 in 5 people who are considered highly sensitive. And now that's actually a trait, meaning it's neutral. So we all have nervous systems, so we all have some sensitivity, but what they found is that people tend to be either, not very sensitive at all, just kind of average, or moderately or highly, that it wasn't kind of this, smooth continuum. It was really, so about half the population is not very sensitive, and the other half is either moderately or highly sensitive. And that means that we perceive the world a little bit differently if you're highly sensitive. You might be more sensitive, for example, to physical stimuli like, perfume, smells, sounds. You might pick up on subtle emotional cues, when you're in an environment, and it can be like a superpower. It actually is. I think it's a phenomenal thing. But the reason that people sometimes often struggle with it, is that it also can be challenging, especially if you don't realize that you have it. So again, there's the awareness piece, right? So when I'm working with young people and I realize that they are highly sensitive, we talk about that, because if you don't even realize what you have, some aspect of yourself, how can you work with it? So the interesting thing to me, research-wise, about why they call it a trait, because they realized that a lot of people were struggling with it, and that people would tend to see it as negative, at least here in the Western world. In the Far East, they've always thought that the sensitive people are
like shamans and
and that they honor that, right? I mean, how else did they come up with even in the Chinese culture, right? They were able to map the meridians, the energy system in the body on their own, because they were sensitive and they paid attention and sensed it. So they've revered the sensitivity, that trait, in the Far East. Here, not as much, right? Especially if you're male. I had a client the other day telling me about growing up, and his father would say, don't be so sensitive, and was very fearful about his son being too sensitive. And how would he be able to be successful in the world if he was sensitive? And in reality, it's actually a really positive attribute for people, but they need to know how to work with it. It's so apropos to, any discussion here in this group, because I think a lot of people who are wellness practitioners, if you tend towards the energy healing side of things in particular, chances are you might be highly sensitive, or you might be moderately. I'm not sure if I was born highly sensitive, but probably moderately, and I think I probably shut it down, numbed it out growing up, and then as I literally, cleared my own system of toxins and changed my own coping mechanisms, and then started working as a practitioner and working with energy, I found that I've become far more sensitive. And so it's been a learning process for me too, and important for me to be aware of that, that trait. The fascinating piece, and the last thing I'll say about this, is that so highly sensitive people in childhood, if we took a highly sensitive person on this side and a not sensitive, non-HSP on the other side, and they both experienced some type of trauma, if they both had a challenging childhood, let's put it that way, the highly sensitive individual child would have it would be more impactful. They would have more of a challenge as a result from going through that challenging childhood. But conversely, if you take a highly sensitive child and a non-highly sensitive, and a non-sensitive child, and they both have a great childhood, the highly sensitive child will actually derive, they found will derive more benefit, like will thrive even more so from that positive experience. So that's why they say it's neutral. It's not like a disorder, it's not a bad thing, it's really a neutral trait, but it's what you do with it and how you manage it.
Yeah.
I love working with teens, especially, so that they can be aware of that sooner and know what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one good example is I was a tennis player, a competitive tennis player. So if the other person lost, I would feel what they were feeling, but I couldn't fix it for them. I could fix my own, but I couldn't fix theirs. So I couldn't win all the time. So if I knew it,
yeah.
if I knew it back then, that was the topic that we were going to go into and finish with. But
okay. We're already ahead of the game.
So it's perfect.
But that's really interesting, Stephanie, if I may interject. Like, that's so interesting what you just said about, your experience as a tennis player and being sensitive and intuitive and picking up. So it's like you could never win, because if you won, you could feel how they felt about losing.
It was worse.
Yeah, I was watching some of the Olympic events with someone I know who's definitely sensitive and who would describe herself as not competitive at all. And I wonder now if that's why, not having that competitive sense, because, it's more fun if you win. And she's never related to that. And I think that's why, because when you're really sensitive and you feel the other person's experience, you're not fully having that winning experience.
Yeah. So if a sports psychologist could worked with me and showed me that it's actually going to help other people, like 10 other people, because I'm inspiring them, then maybe, I don't know, maybe that could have impacted a little bit differently.
Yeah, it could shift your perspective and then be able to really
be like, this is for the other people.
Helping others, yeah. It's not just hurting the person that you're playing, because it's not necessarily either. Maybe that's the other thing that comes to mind is everybody needs to have these different experiences and learn what it's like to lose, right?
Yeah.
What that feels like, and then come back from that.
Exactly. So thank you for joining today. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Likewise. Thank you.